October 1995. O.J. Simpson walks out of the trial of the century as a free man, defeating the entire American justice system, September 2007. The Palace Station Hotel in Las Vegas. He leads armed men into a cheap room just to steal his own old photographs and autographed footballs. On the surface, this looks like the pathetic act of a broke, fallen star desperate for black market cash. But I've been reading the bankruptcy filings. This isn't a story about a man stealing money to pay off debts. It's a story about a man desperately using a gun to steal back his identity. To understand why he would risk 33 years in a Nevada prison for a few dusty souvenirs, you have to look at what the system actually took from him. It wasn't the money. It started in the 1950s in Potrero Hill, San Francisco. It was a brutal public housing project where weakness wasn't just noticed, it was punished. In the projects, you either projected strength or you became a target. He was raised by a single mother who worked relentlessly as a hospital orderly to keep the family afloat. His father, Jimmy Simpson, abandoned the family early on. Years later, Jimmy would come out as a drag queen in the San Francisco Bay Area. In that era, and in that hyper-masculine environment, the revelation didn't bring understanding. It brought an intense, suffocating shame to a young boy desperate to prove he belonged. It birthed a desperate need to project absolute, unshakable masculinity at all times, no matter what it cost the people around him. But the real wound wasn't emotional. It was physical. Misfortune arrived in the form of rickets. Because his bones were softening from a severe vitamin deficiency, a young O.J. Simpson was forced to wear crude, heavy iron braces on his legs until he was 5 years old. He was weak. He was visibly disabled. He was different. The iron braces taught him the most ruthless lesson of his childhood. The world despises frailty. The world preys on the broken. If you show a crack in your armor, the environment will swallow you whole. So he decided to never be weak again. Football wasn't just an athletic pursuit. It was the ultimate psychological exit. It was a way to aggressively shed the iron braces forever. Every time he ran the ball, every tackle he broke, he was outrunning the memory of being the crippled boy in Potrero Hill. The football field was the only place where nobody could touch him. The stadium lights blinded everyone to his past. The uniform was the armor that concealed the vulnerable child underneath. He discovered that if you are spectacular enough, if you are fast enough, society won't just forgive you. It will actively protect you. It will build walls around you. By 1969, the transformation was complete. He was drafted number 1 overall by the Buffalo Bills. But when he entered the professional league, he wasn't just content with being a football player. He wanted to be a deity. In an era deeply segregated by race and politics, O.J. made a conscious, calculated decision to transcend his background entirely. He didn't want to be a black star in America. He wanted to be an American star. "I'm not black, I'm O.J." That was his famous declaration. It wasn't just a quote, it was a manifesto. He was manufacturing the perfect, impenetrable public persona to shield himself from the world. He curated a smile that disarmed sponsors and fans alike. He built an image so universally beloved, so relentlessly charismatic, and so thoroughly scrubbed of any controversial edges that he became untouchable. He was the juice. The mask worked. It allowed him to navigate the highest echelons of corporate America, slipping seamlessly into elite country clubs and boardrooms where no black athlete had ever been welcomed before. He believed that as long as he kept running, the braces would never come back. But masks only work if the world keeps believing in them. And more dangerously, they only work if the man wearing them remembers they are just masks. The rise was meteoric, and it was absolute. In the fall of 1973, wearing the royal blue of the Buffalo Bills, O.J. Simpson achieved the impossible. He became the first player in National Football League history to rush for more than 2,000 yards in a single season. The numbers were staggering, but they only told a fraction of the story. On the field, he was a god. Off the field, he was constructing an empire. While his NFL contracts provided him with substantial wealth, earning over $500,000 a year when most players made a fraction of that. The real money wasn't in football. The real money was in the image. He secured a groundbreaking endorsement deal with Hertz rental cars. When the commercials aired, showing him effortlessly hurdling over luggage in an airport while white businessmen cheered him on, it wasn't just an advertisement. It was a cultural milestone. He became the very first black man to be the national face of a major American corporation. Corporate America looked at him and didn't see race. They saw profitability. They saw the juice. With that profitability came a lifestyle that very few athletes could comprehend, let alone afford. He purchased a sprawling, magnificent estate in the exclusive neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles. He spent his afternoons playing golf at the Riviera Country Club, rubbing shoulders with studio executives, politicians, and billionaires. He cultivated an entourage, a small army of hangers-on, business associates and admirers who existed for one primary purpose: to say yes. He built a kingdom where the word no had essentially been eradicated from the vocabulary. This lifestyle required massive capital. He moved fluidly between television broadcasting, sports commentary, and Hollywood acting. He was spending exuberantly, living the American dream with a level of visibility that demanded perfection. He wasn't just throwing money away. Every expense was a calculated investment into maintaining the grand illusion of the O.J. Simpson brand. The parties, the cars, the tailored suits. They were all necessary components of the armor, but armor is heavy, and eventually, the man carrying it starts to fatigue. The first significant crack in the foundation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened long before the trial of the century. It happened on New Year's Eve in 1989. A terrified 911 call echoed through the dispatch center. The police were sent to the Brentwood estate. When they arrived, they found his wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, hiding in the bushes, badly beaten, shivering, and terrified for her life. She told the officers that he was going to kill her. Here is what should have happened. Authorities should have arrested him. The system should have intervened, stripped away the privileges, and forced him to confront the violent reality of his actions. The corporate sponsors should have fled in terror. But here's what nobody saw. When the Los Angeles Police Department officers walked into the Brentwood estate, they didn't see an abuser. They saw the man who hurdled luggage for Hertz. They saw the charming face from television. Instead of treating the situation with the severity it demanded, they accommodated him. According to records of previous visits, some officers would just chat with him about football. They asked for his autograph. Nobody asked about the rage simmering underneath the smile. This wasn't just an isolated incident of poor policing. This was the athletic impunity culture, functioning exactly as it was designed to, in America. When a man generates millions of dollars for the economy, when his highlight reels keep viewers glued to their televisions, the system creates an exemption for him. The NFL, the media, and the corporate sponsors didn't suddenly go blind. They actively chose to look away. They saw the warning signs. They saw the violent outbursts. They saw the narcissism curdling into something deeply dangerous. But acknowledging those flaws meant killing the golden goose. So, rather than holding him accountable, they aggressively protected their investment. They buried the flaws. They minimized the 1989 incident to a minor domestic dispute, allowing him to plead no contest and avoid any real jail time. They swept the broken glass under the rug and kept the cameras rolling. He wasn't failing a system. The system was failing him by refusing to stop him. They created a monster equipped with an impenetrable shield of privilege, completely divorced from the consequences of his own actions. They granted him a terrifying immunity from ordinary rules. They taught him he was untouchable, so he believed them. On October 3, 1995, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of double murder in what the media enthusiastically dubbed the trial of the century. Legally, he walked out of that Los Angeles courtroom a free man. Culturally, however, he was already dead. The immediate aftermath brought a catastrophic financial reckoning. The criminal trial had required the assembly of a staggering defense roster, famously known as the Dream Team. Those lawyers didn't work for publicity. They worked for hard currency. The defense fees alone eclipsed $5 million, aggressively draining his liquid assets. But the real collapse didn't happen in 1995. It arrived in February 1997. A civil jury found him liable for the wrongful deaths and ordered him to pay a devastating $33.5 million in compensatory and punitive damages to the victims' families. The mathematics of his life instantly, violently shattered. His corporate sponsors had long since sprinted away in terror. Hertz terminated his contracts. The television networks stopped returning his calls. Hollywood permanently closed its doors. His primary sources of elite income dropped to absolute zero. Yet, he had rigorously maintained a life that required a colossal volume of liquid cash just to break even. The private landscape gardeners, the house managers, the country club membership fees, the luxury automobile leases, those expenses didn't politely halt just because the massive endorsement checks stopped coming. The daily arithmetic became completely unsustainable. The math was irrevocably broken. When the civil verdict was delivered, it didn't just cripple him on paper. It unleashed an aggressive, humiliating campaign of asset forfeiture. Appraisers and debt collectors descended, meticulously itemizing and stripping away his entire life. They seized his sprawling Brentwood estate, dragging it through the foreclosure process to satisfy the overwhelming debts. They seized his vehicles, his golf clubs, and even his custom-tailored suits. In February 1999, the ultimate symbol of his athletic divinity was placed on a public auction block. His legendary Heisman Trophy, the physical embodiment of his greatness, was sold to the highest bidder for $328,500. The money didn't go to him. It went straight to the families. He was legally alive, but existentially erased. But here is what the court documents reveal about the systemic mechanics of his ruin. To understand his final descent, you must observe the two distinct systems that simultaneously failed him, insulated him, and ultimately destroyed him. The first failure was the athletic impunity culture. For 3 decades, the entire American sports apparatus, the media, the police, the corporate executives, had systematically trained O.J. Simpson to believe he was completely exempt from consequences. When the LAPD responded to numerous domestic violence calls at his home before 1994, they routinely asked for his autograph instead of placing him in handcuffs. They actively taught him that his charm and his fame could easily override the law. When he eventually stood in a Nevada hotel room years later, armed and aggressive, he wasn't acting like a common criminal. He was acting like a man who genuinely believed his own mythology. The system had spent millions of dollars building an impenetrable armor of privilege around him. They didn't protect him. They just delayed the bill. The second failure was the pension loophole. According to financial records, while the civil courts were aggressively seizing his trophies and auctioning off his personal photographs, they encountered a massive legal barrier. The Employee Retirement Income Security Act, commonly known as ERISA. This federal law strictly protected his NFL and Screen Actors Guild pensions from any civil judgments or creditors. As a result, O.J. Simpson was continuously receiving over $300,000 a year in guaranteed, untouchable retirement income. That translates to roughly $25,000 every single month. He was not starving in the streets. He was not a desperate man trying to secure a meal. He had moved to Florida, where state laws further protected his primary residence from seizure. The mathematics were incredibly cruel, but not in the way people assume. The system seized every artifact that proved the juice had once existed, but it ensured his physical survival. They left his body fed, but starved his ego. Without his wealth, without his Brentwood mansion, and without his corporate adoration, he was left with nothing but ghosts. The only things tethering him to his past glory were the physical items bearing his name, the old Buffalo Bills jerseys, the signed footballs, the faded photographs. When those items were auctioned off, they didn't just take his property. They took his armor. They pushed him back toward the vulnerability of his childhood. This brings us to the actual rock bottom. It wasn't the civil verdict. It was September 2007. O.J. Simpson walked into room 1203 at the Palace Station Hotel in Las Vegas. He wasn't there to gamble. He was leading a small group of cohorts, 2 of whom were carrying concealed firearms. It was a clumsy, amateurish, and profoundly stupid operation. He brought a group of men he barely knew into a casino hotel with surveillance cameras rolling in every corridor. They burst into the cheap room to confront 2 memorabilia dealers. He stormed in with a shocking sense of entitlement, demanding the return of his stolen legacy. He didn't demand cash. He demanded his own history. "I'm just trying to get my stuff back." That wasn't a tactical defense strategy. That quote, captured during the chaotic robbery, perfectly encapsulated a radically fractured mind. He honestly believed he had the sovereign right to walk into a room with weapons and reclaim the physical evidence of his fame. He thought the sheer magnitude of his presence would intimidate everyone into submission. He was operating under a delusion so profound that he couldn't grasp the reality of his own actions. He was risking his absolute freedom, not for millions of dollars, but for dusty artifacts that bore his signature. He was a broken idol, desperately scrambling in the dirt to glue the shattered pieces of his golden mask back together. The police arrived. The handcuffs clicked. There were no requests for autographs this time. The Nevada judge, looking down at him from the bench, did not see an American hero, a hurt spokesman, or a Heisman winner. The judge saw a violent, arrogant felon. The judge didn't care about the irony. So what is the dark reality of O.J. Simpson's final collapse? It is not a simple story of a desperate, aging athlete turning to armed robbery to pay his bills. It is not a tale of sudden financial starvation. And it certainly isn't a conventional cautionary tale about poor investment choices. He didn't ultimately fail because he was broke. He failed because he discovered something infinitely more terrifying than poverty. He realized that being broke wasn't the worst possible fate. Being invisible was. The stolen sports memorabilia in that cramped Las Vegas hotel room wasn't a quick payday. It wasn't transportation out of debt. It was armor. It was the only tangible proof left in the universe that he wasn't just another convicted felon waiting to die. The autographed footballs and the faded photographs were the last remaining bricks of the colossal monument he had spent an entire lifetime building. When the civil courts stripped those artifacts away, they didn't just take his property. They took his identity. They took his carefully constructed defense mechanism. They forced him to confront the terrifying reality that beneath the fame, the money, and the charm, he was just a vulnerable, flawed human being trying to outrun his own shadow. This story matters, not as another sensationalized chapter for a true crime podcast. Not as a simple cautionary tale about the consequences of murder. This story matters as a stark, horrifying mirror of how America manufactures its heroes, and what those heroes inevitably become when the spotlight finally shuts off. We create untouchable gods out of young men simply because they can run fast on a Sunday afternoon. We gladly hand them the keys to the city and grant them total immunity from the rules that govern the rest of us. We worship wealth and athletic dominance, but we provide absolutely no psychological framework for what happens when the physical gifts erode. We teach them that they are completely invincible, right up until the exact microsecond they are no longer useful to the bottom line. And then, when the mask eventually shatters and they break the ultimate rules, we are shocked by their arrogance. We systemically dismantle every piece of the godhood we help build, leaving them with absolutely nothing but the profound, suffocating emptiness they were trying to escape in the first place. O.J. Simpson was released on parole the fall of 2017 after spending 9 years inside the Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada for the botched robbery. He returned to a world that had completely moved on without him because of the federal protections of ERISA. His substantial NFL pension was legally waiting for him. He relocated to a comfortable, gated community in Las Vegas, Nevada, continuing to exist in a strange, surreal purgatory. He spent his final years actively posting bizarre, conversational videos on social media, usually sitting alone in a golf cart. He was desperately trying to maintain an audience that was largely just scrolling past him, completely indifferent to the man who once commanded their absolute attention. He had successfully avoided paying the vast majority of the $33.5 million civil judgment. The court could never force him into absolute poverty. On April 10, 2024, O.J. Simpson died quietly surrounded by his family at the age of 76, following a battle with prostate cancer. The news of his death flashed across television screens for a few days, briefly resurrecting the old debates and the old anger. But it was only a brief echo of a man who used to effortlessly dominate every channel in the world. He died as a physically free man. His bank accounts were never entirely drained. He took his final breath with millions of dollars safely shielded in retirement accounts that the system could never touch. But the braces were always there.